Bye-bye. Okay, so up next we have a guest from Postman. His name is Arlemi Turpault. Hi, welcome to the screen. And
Hello.
he's here today. Hi, you're here to talk about how to win friends and influence people with API first, which is an absolutely fantastic presentation. I can't wait to listen to this one.
Thank you.
Okay, you're looking good.
Let's go. I'll just reset my timer. Just want to make sure I take 20 minutes. Hey everyone, welcome to this talk about how to win friends and influence people with API first. Sarah's talk before was actually the perfect leeway into that, and they actually started talking about how you can use Postman for documentation, etc. She was talking about junior developers, and these are the type of people that you could influence using API first. So we'll jump into that. I work at Postman, as you'll see on all of the slides, but this talk is not about Postman. It's not a marketing talk. I'm not going to do any demos in Postman. It's very much a general talk about API first. Just so you know, Postman is a collaboration and an API platform tool. You can do tons of stuff on the API consumer side or on the API producer side. But this talk is not about that. This talk is about how to win friends and influence people with API first. So you can see my great Photoshop skills there, where I've taken the original book and just added a line. Can't even see. But the point here is that the same way we have a lot of users at Postman. You saw on the previous slide, we have like 17 million, probably more now. There's tons of different people working on APIs, from the people that are going to think about the APIs, to people that are going to code the API, and the people that are going to consume it. So let's see kind of the story there from the ideation to the consumption. To do that, I'm going to walk through five main points. We'll see what is API first, because I want to make sure that everyone here knows the same thing. I don't want to start thinking that we all know what API first mean. We'll see the benefits of becoming API first. Then we'll jump into the different tools and workflows for API first, and look at some industry examples from big companies like Netflix, etc. Then at the end, I'll just go back to the key points to make sure that even if you snooze during the talk, that's fine. You'll get a quick summary. But yeah, with that said, let's jump into the first part, which is what does API first mean to you? So at Postman, we have tons of users. We also have the state of API report that we do every year, where we go out and we ask people tons of questions. Part of my job is going out there, like the conference today, and chatting with you all, kind of learn about how you use API first and learn from other speakers as well. But I can't talk to as many people as we survey. So this one was for, I think, about 28,000 people that replied. And what we can see here is that we have 11% of the people that are not quite sure what API first is. The other 89% are familiar with the term, but they don't all have the same definition. So we'll go with the broadest, which is API first development, and then we'll go all the way down to design first using API specifications, like it's been mentioned in previous talks. If we look at if we want to define something, a good way is to look at the complete opposite. So if we look at the API first, the complete opposite would be API last, or code first, as it's also called. So let's have a look at what code first is. And code first is what's been done for a lot of times, a long time. So in code first, you start with the core functionality, basically what your app is going to do, and likely your backend. Once that's ready, just put an API on top of that, and then someone will start consuming it. So ideally, a web app, maybe a mobile app. And then what can happen is that you'll have another service that's going to try to consume it. So you need to create an admin application that's going to use the same API, a mobile application. And that's a very common workflow. But then maybe you'll have internal people that need to consume your API. or maybe you want to split your backend in different functions, and you need to provide a different API. So you can already see there's likely there's duplicated work there. One of the company that transitioned from that to API first is Etsy, and we have a quote from Stephanie Schermer from Etsy, and what she said is, all of the code that was built for the website then had to be rebuilt in our API to be used in our mobile applications. And the reason for that is that they started with the core functionality and not with the API, so they didn't think ahead. So they rebuilt everything, and using API first, they were able to kind of gather just every kind of please everyone that wanted to consume the API. Another way that I like to kind of think about the disconnect between building two things in different places is that tweet that I saw a while back. If you don't think about the API at the start, you'll have your backend team, you'll have your front-end team, but they likely not talking to each other. And then what happens when you connect is that, well, the front-end is a happy path, the backend is a happy path, but then when you put them together, they might not be connecting right. So now let's have a look at the API first development flow. So with the API first development, you start with your API. Well, that kind of in the name, so kind of gave it away there. And then you think about your potential customers. So likely your application engineers will be the first one to consume the API, and that paves the way for the other one. So you probably get admin app again, mobile apps, etc. And that's all conceptually. You've not built anything of your core functionality, right? All you have is who's going to consume your API. The different functions they'll need to have, the different parameters they provide, and the data that they get back. But you're thinking of the API only, and then based on your consumer, you can infer what you need to build at the backend. So how does these two compare tactically, right? We've seen the kind of overview. Now let's go into how it works kind of for real. So if you look at code first again, likely you have your code. Once you have your code, so your core functionality code, you commit it to a source code. So that goes to your repository, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, you name it. And once you have that, you can deploy to production or to your development environment, staging, etc. And only then you can start testing, debugging, documenting, and you have this back and forth between whoever tests and then the way you implement. And that's likely a lot of you here. I've been through that workflow, and that's I've been through it. That's what's mostly done. There's a few problems with that, and that's the part where you do not make friends. For example, there's bottlenecks because obviously you kind of provide the product to test to everyone at the same time, and likely you might not have the resources to handle all the feedback at the that comes back from that. You do some reworking late in the development cycle, so you've already coded your app, you already have all your connections to your other microservices, etc. Then you open it to the people to use. Well, that's going to be that's already late in your development cycle. You might be building stuff that no one wants, right? Like you've coded some stuff, put it out there, and then no one's using your endpoint. That's a bit sad for the endpoint, but that's also a bit sad for the time you put into that. And then maybe it's the product is inadequately documented, and that goes back to the previous stuff, right? Like you want to make sure you have good documentation for people to start consuming your API or your service. And then the API is constrained by the business logic. Now let's have a look at the flow for API first. So API first, you start with your API definition. You start with the designing, architecting, and then just from having this API definition, you can already create a mock server. You can write tests against that mock server. You can even generate documentation from it. Once you have that and you're happy with what the mock does, and you can even provide this mock to your front-end team, for example, then they can start consuming the mock to see that it does what they want it to do. then you can get into coding that application. So you could code it. There's also ways to do code generation from an API definition. So you would be able to kind of generate the architecture of your app. Obviously, it's not going to code all the way to your connection with databases, etc. But you already get like a template that you can start working with. And once you have that, that's where you can start pushing that to your repository, to your source control. So then what you can see is that very early in this process, you can gather feedback and you can implement that feedback before even getting to coding. So likely you've seen the main difference, and that's where you start making friends. So you've got earlier validation, so you're getting feedback earlier in the development cycle. You get to decouple dependencies, right? From the start, you can start with the developers. You give them a mock server that can start using that. You can also provide it to testers. And then your documentation or technical writers can also work in parallel. So all of these teams don't have to wait all the way to the end to start documenting or testing. You can provide them with that from the start, and they go on and work in parallel, just relying on the API definition. Faster growth, likely involving more people at the start, allows you to grow quickly, scale better because you know what your consumers are going to be, and then you kind of free yourself from constraints because you don't have this constraint from maybe the framework you're using for your code. Just knowing that you have this API definition, you can then think about what's the best framework to use, or what's the best maybe language to use, etc. There's a few other benefits down the line that will make you friends like other places in the company. For example, likely reduce cost. Your manager would like that. It's always good to be in good terms with your manager. Easier onboarding. That goes back to Sarah's talk before. You want to be friends with all your end users. So being able to give them an easier onboarding is always a good thing. One company that I mentioned at the start is Netflix, and what they did, and that's kind of like how they see API first now, which is a single team should not become a bottleneck, nor need to have expertise on every client application to create optimized endpoints. Rapid innovation through fast, decoupled development cycle across a wide variety of device types, and distributed ownership and expertise across teams should be enabled. So you can probably recognize some of the points there. Rapid innovation, decoupled development cycles, and then the variety of device type that can start hitting your API. This is from 2013, which is many years ago now. But you can see that we're already on top of that. Another one that you might be aware of, the AWS's API mandate, I think it was called, is the time when at AWS they said, okay, now every single team is a microservice, and every team needs to provide an API for other teams to consume it, and that enable like much faster development cycles, etc. So while we've seen all this, there's still like these different definitions. So we looked at different things. We looked at the different definitions, but then we looked at who thinks they are API first. So if you look at those who think they're doing API first, or those that know their API first, they usually tend to think of API first as defining and designing APIs and schema before development. That's what we're going to look at. So that's our definition with API first. Now let's look at the different tools and workflows for doing API first. There's three main ones that we look at. It's API specification or API definitions. I've said that a lot until now in the talk. Mock servers, I've mentioned it a bit, and consumer-driven contract testing, aka CDC testing. So API specification first. You probably know about a few of them. There's it's a way to describe APIs. So the description format, there's Swagger that was mentioned, there's OpenAPI, async API, etc. Then there's the API description document or API definition. That's the file that you provide to other teams, and they can generate mock servers, API documentation, etc. And then there's the API reference, API documentation that can also be generated from that. So when we look at how they're used, these different specifications, that's also a question that we've asked during our survey. We can see that JSON schema is the most widely used, but it's not only used for API. So it's a bit, it's probably not the right way to look at it. Actually, we had a talk also earlier about apps without APIs, and they were using JSON schema to describe their data models. So let's look at Swagger, OpenAPI, and GraphQL, which are the three main use. So that's self-reported. We also looked at the usage in Postman. So in Postman, we have our users who we kind of dig through it, and we can also see that OpenAPI 2 and OpenAPI 3 are the most used one. And then there's this tiny yellow bar at the top, which includes Swagger, Waddle, and Raml. So one of the ones that you can use is OpenAPI, and what it enables authoring the specification, and then from the start you can start see validation. So that's in Postman. There's other tools, so it tells you what's wrong, and you can also collaborate. So for example, here I think so that's my colleague Joyce doing some OpenAPI authoring, and then she's going to tag me. And she's gonna straight there collaborate with someone else from the team and ask me to do some stuff on that specific OpenAPI definition. As I mentioned before, there's teams that use OpenAPI specification for many things, from generating server-side code to documentation, testing, mock servers, etc. Let me skip to the next slide. Let's jump into mock servers. Mock servers, if you're not aware, it's basically fake endpoints that return fake data, but that fake data should be very much similar to what your API actually does. And you can also generate them from an OpenAPI. So using the OpenAPI you saw in the previous video, we can go in, create a new mock server, give it a name. So again, there's all the tools. One URL that I usually give, you can go to openapi.tools. There's tons of tools out there that allow you to do that. So now I have generated that mock server. I have a live URL that I can copy paste. And now I'm just going to go in, create a new request. So you can see here, I have that URL that was calling my local host. I can change that to use the mock server URL. And once I've done that, save it. Always remember to save in Postman. I can now hit that endpoint with that live URL, and I'll get fake data, but that's generated from the OpenAPI specification. So now that endpoint, I can give it to my dev team, my any team that wants to integrate with my API, any consumer, and they'll be able to use it. The last one is just going back to why you may use them. So you can generate them from API specification, and you can prototype new services, so you can do parallel development again. The last one is consumer-driven contract testing, which is a bit of a mouthful, and I always struggle with that one. But one way I describe this one is with a meme. That meme is already a bit old, because that TV show is now at least 2 months old. But CDC testing is what avoids your third-party integration to break. The reason why is that you're actually working with your consumers. So if you're not familiar with what consumer-driven contract testing is, you're the provider, and then you tell your different consumers this is how they should use your API. So you provide them with the API definition. They know what's in there, and they know what they can do with it. So they'll go in, and they'll implement their usage, and they'll write some tests. Once they have these tests, they'll provide them back to you. And then you as the consumer, as the provider, when you release a new version of your API, you'll run these tests as part of your CI/CD pipeline. So what this allows is to make sure that you're not breaking anyone's usage of your API. You have this explicit contract between your consumer and you, the provider, and that's why it's called consumer-driven contract testing. And that's making your consumers happy, which we also always very happy with that, and we like to have them as friends. So yeah, sorry, I actually skipped that slide. They provide the test, and then you run them as part of your as part of your pipeline. So we actually do that at Postman. Every team has a blueprint collection. They provide them to the other teams that they can start building on top of their mock servers. And then all the other teams that consume this mock server will provide these tests back to the provider. And each team runs all the other squads teams' test as part of their pipeline. I'm running short on time, so I'm going to rush through that last slide. What does API first mean to you? We saw that we'll go with the API first design. So you think about what functionality will your API have, what data it will expose, the developer experience, and then the scaling part of it. And the benefits are the following: earlier validation, decoupling dependencies, faster growth, and freedom from constraints. We've seen there's a few other ones, reduced cost, etc. And then the question you may ask yourself now is API first for everyone, or is it for you? It may not be. If you're just building a single endpoint API for your personal usage in your personal network, don't start with an API specification or an API definition. But likely, if you have different people using your API, if you're using cloud services, or if you're planning to have like different teams consuming your API, it's probably for you. I'll leave you with two quotes. One from Andrew, which is Vice President of Development, who said, API first in organization means that we can think of what is possible rather than what is not possible when it comes to providing the best features and functionality. We no longer have the difficulties to customization or integration with system and applications. And then the last one from Kinlane, who's the Chief Evangelist at Postman, which is a bit simple, but in one line, it's going to be hard. Going API first is not easy. There's a few hurdles you may face, but we're here to help. You can always reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help. Quick plug to the API First World. It's a comic that we've put online. There's also a hard book version, but you can just read it online, which kind of talks about our vision for an API First world. And with that, I'm a minute late. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me. I'll be sharing the slides later on or on my Twitter. So if you want to follow me, you'll get all these links. Bunch of stuff that I'll share later. But yeah, thank you for following.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Just to check the chat then. So we've had a couple of questions. One from Hasham and Sally has added to it as well. So I actually have the same question. I wrote it down before they put theirs, so I'm going to kind of ask it. So I was on one project a few years back. We did exactly this style, the API first. We actually did the contract first, co-creation with the customer. So we went to the customer and we said, okay, what are your problems? And then we set about solving those problems with APIs. Did use Postman to mock the back end, and then we were able to show the API working, and the customer was in love, right? Oh, this is so amazing, fantastic, it's great. We did exactly textbook. And then we went to speak to the rest of the organization at that point, right? To all these kind of like legacy teams. And they were like, oh, wow, yeah, maybe we could do that. But anyway, we don't have bandwidth, maybe in 2 years or these kind of things. And yeah, I don't think there's a good answer to that. But do you have any ideas how, bigger organizations can get around that problem?
I think that's a tough one. And it's part of it's going to be hard. And the way we are trying to solve it is with all our, and it's a bit of marketing talk, but all this API first world is all we're trying to get higher level, C-levels type executives to buy in this API first wording. So Postman has always been like a developer tool, and developers love the tool and they use it. But then when it comes to, as you mentioned, like going into the organization, kind of get buy-in for, we need to change completely how we work. There's benefits down the line, but people might not be buying into that. So we have again this comic, which is like very high level and kind of talks about the benefits. We have tons of communication ads in the Wall Street Journal, because that's where executives read stuff. Apparently, I don't know. That's
Apparently.
apparently I don't know. I think it's good to put the word out there anyway. But that's kind of our communication thing. I think at the moment, we need to make sure that everyone at every level of the company like understands the benefits of them, and then it's going to be much easier because like word to like mouth wording. I don't remember the saying for that, but you probably get what I mean.
Word of mouth, yeah.
Yeah, word of mouth. That's the one. It's great, but there's you'll hit some blockers where mostly it's going to be okay. How do we pay for this? What's going to be the time for us to implement that, etc. We need to deliver something tomorrow. So that's where the battle is at the moment. I think it's mostly communication. That's generally why I'm here as well, right? Like I'm talking to tons of API people about these things.
Yeah, makes sense. Or then you adopt the your one of the things you mentioned in your presentation, the Jeff Bezos style, which is basically do it or you're fired, right? Let's not miss that. That was the ultimatum. Hey, thank you so much. Lovely presentation, and hope to see you again sometime.
Thank you for having me. Bye bye.